The second time around for Jake Browning against the Pittsburgh Steelers was somehow worse for the Bengals than the worst time around, and this time it deals a severe blow to their playoff hopes. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team, the Cincinnati Bengals, every day. You can find us on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. We appreciate all of you everydayers, especially here in this holiday season. Those of you that stick it out with us during the holidays are awesome. All the first listeners, and well, Merry Christmas, even though the Bengals didn't necessarily give you what you wanted this year. This episode brought to you by the Gametime app. Create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. You'll save $20 on your first purchase. Lowest price on last-minute tickets, guaranteed. And not a very good game, James, to put it very, very lightly.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. I could use a few adjectives to describe it. Awful, certainly one. Nightmare, Christmas nightmare. We could go down the list, but the thing that I come back to that, well, there's two things. One, the Bengals during this stretch, and even that first matchup against Pittsburgh, really, but over the past month before tonight, had always responded the right way when they get punched in the mouth. Like, there's been times in each of those games, even though they won the last three going into tonight's game with the Steelers, where it could have swung the other way, and they've responded. And tonight, it was the perfect complementary football where everything went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that went right is they could move the ball. The downside is they kept turning the ball over and they didn't score. The defense, I think George Pickens is still running. You might have been able to get open against Cheeto tonight. Dax Hill's bad angle, the 86-yarder set the tone for everything. Because coming into tonight, George Pickens was about to get booed out of Pittsburgh, and he's immature by anyone that you ask across the league calls him that. And you give him an 86-yarder to get going. He gets to hug Mike Tomlin. Mason Rudolph feels good. They have all the momentum. The crowd gets into it. Like, that is the play that just set the tone for everything. And I thought the Bengals might be able to respond, and they almost did, until Jake Browning tried to throw it away and threw it to Patrick Peterson. So that sequence, I think, is what really kind of put them in the position that they ended up in at 34-11.
Is it better or worse that the interception was an attempted throwaway? Because I don't know. I don't know. I think it's worse. Like, it's a really bad decision either way, but leaving it inbounds when you're trying to throw it away is as bad as it gets in the NFL. That's what I tweeted during the game. That's as bad an interception as you can throw in the NFL.
Yeah, here's why it's worse. And it's also what Jake Browning is. And it's a reminder that Jake Browning has physical limitations. And so even mentally, if he's like, I need to throw the ball away here. By the way, you don't need to throw it out of the back of the end zone. Just throw it away. Throw a dart if you need to, but get it past the line of scrimmage and get it out of bounds. That was it. When those two plays happen, you're like, man, they're on the ropes. And the Steelers, they march right downfield through this defense like Swiss cheese. There's holes all over. 10 plays, 80 yards, another touchdown. And I couldn't foresee them digging themselves out of that hole in that building against that team when they have the momentum, and they didn't.
Given the way the Steelers were playing to start the game, the whole was, I mean, I pre-wrote, a title for the show and a description for the show at halftime, assuming things didn't change. I left it unfinished in case things did change, but you can see the way the game was going to go, or the way it would finish, rather, if it continued the way it started. And the way it started was, you got a great punt from Brad Robbins after you got a first down on the first drive of the game. You pinned the Steelers back deep. And then immediately the Steelers like, oh, you don't have DJ Reader. Look, we can run the ball. 6-yard gain on the first play of the game, which isn't a big deal in and of itself, but it lets the Steelers call whatever they want on the second play of the game. And it puts Lou Anarumo in a spot where maybe he has to call single high because second and short, that's a good spot to call a run play if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then you end up with a slant instead. Very easy decision for Mason Rudolph. George Pickens wins off the line of scrimmage against press man from a guy he probably has 30 pounds on, at least, in DJ Turner. And then Dax takes, I don't want to pile on too much, but I mean, that's one of the worst angles you could possibly take, not only missing the tackle from your post safety spot, but also cutting off DJ Turner, who's your fastest guy with the chance to catch Pickens. And then Jermaine Pratt trying to trail the play gets caught up in the massive humanity. Bengals defenders being all of that humanity at that spot. And that's it. Second drive. You're right that the Bengals go answer, and then you get this terrible pick instead of 7-3, probably 7 to Steelers have the ball. And then again, running game, huge for the Steelers on that drive. 8-yard carry, 13-yard carry, jet sweep that was a crushing block to Jermaine Pratt and an easy touchdown. I mean, the run D was bad early. The Steelers got to do whatever they wanted early. They got out to a 14-0 lead, 2 drives into the game. And there is literally not a worse place from a game script perspective for you to be. What did we talk about going into the game? Take care of the ball, find a way to run the ball efficiently, make Mason Rudolph beat you. The Bengals did none of those things.
None of them. No, because, and even though Mason Rudolph, it was a touchdown, the throw, you're right, it was an easy throw.
Should have been a 10-yard gain.
It should have been. But even if it's a 30-yard gain, you could live with that. An 86-yard backbreaker after you finally get a good punt from Brad Robbins.
Yeah.
You finally do. It's like, oh, well, they got a first down. They converted their first third down, and then they have to punt. Okay, it can be that kind of game. You can live with that. And boom, just like that, George Pickens out of the chute. And those interceptions are just – it's 13 points off the board. Jake Browning's 3 interceptions. The 3 points for Evan McPherson. Then a second interception the Steelers score on, a touchdown. And then they score 3 more points. So it's 13 points off of turnovers, 34-11. It's a much different game if you just reverse those. And yet that's part of it. The other part is this defense where, man, losing DJ Reader, it was the fear. And Najee Harris averaged 7.3 yards per carry in the first quarter. Mason Rudolph had 130 yards passing on 4 attempts. He was 4 for 4 for 130. And they scored on the first or second play of the second quarter to make it 14-0. So,
and this thing that's been there for them, like the thing that has saved the score, that the red zone takeaway, just like non-existent today.
0 turnovers. They didn't force. They weren't even close to forcing a turnover today.
Maybe once, maybe generously.
Just non-existent. And that's the fear is this defense being that. If that's it, well, then they're not good enough because they've given up big plays and not tackled well all season long. And they've been bad against the run, even with DJ Reader all season long.
It's complementary football issues. They got none of that today. They didn't get any, like, I'm trying to find bright spots to talk about for this show. And there's maybe one. There's one.
There's a couple.
There's a couple. Great. We'll get to those eventually, but we do need to talk about this defense as well. And just, I mean, everything that could go wrong went wrong. We'll continue our takeaways from the game coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by FanDuel. FanDuel has a little bit of a present for you this holiday season. New customers right now can get $150 in bonus bets. And the way to do that, $150 free dollars, all you got to do is win a $5 moneyline bet. Just straight up moneyline bet, $5. Doesn't matter what the line is. $150 if the team you pick against the money line wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, that means there's no better time to get in on the action with 150 free bonus bucks at stake. It's easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options. They've got spreads, players, props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon Check out everything they've got on offer, everything they've got going on. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Today's show is also brought to you by Schultz Jewelers. Look, I get it. You're watching this. It is either Saturday night, maybe you're already at Christmas Eve. Well, Schultz Jewelers is the place to go to find that perfect diamond for her. And whether you're going to pop the question or you're looking for the right earrings or the right bracelet, or maybe you don't know exactly what you are looking for and you need some assistance. Well, Matt Schultz and his team are here for you. Matt has a background in education, so he's going to be patient with you, even if you don't know jack about jewelry. And let's be honest, I don't know jack about jewelry, but Matt will help you through it just like he would help me, help Jake, help everyone. They have lab-grown diamonds, so you can get your fiance her dream ring without hurting your wallet. Don't delay. Check them out at 2202 Dixie Highway in Fort Mitchell, 5 minutes from the bridge into Kentucky, or online at schultzdiamonds.com. That's SCHULZ diamonds.com. We know the Bengals strive for perfection. Schultz Jewelers does too, because when it has to be perfect, it has to be Schultz Jewelers.
So the game got off to a really bad start. That set the tone for the entire game. But we've seen this team come back from bad starts this year. They just did it last week. They just came back from a similar deficit last week. The difference is it wasn't quite so big a hole. 24-0 at halftime. Not a whole lot of teams in the NFL coming back from that spot. Jake Browning played really poorly in this game. That's a big part of the problem. There's a lot of criticism of the coaching staff, I think, right now. The defense also played poorly, even when there were okay calls. But some of their depth issues showed up today too, James. Mm-hmm. Some of the spots we've been talking about. And down their three best players, one thing that you can't forget about, one thing you keep coming back to, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, DJ Reader, all pro level players on this team. It was just too much. Like you can't get down 14-0 against a team who has the edge rushers that Pittsburgh does in their building without your studs. And it was just obviously too much in this game.
Yeah, it was. And there's a couple of things, but the margin for error just isn't there. Like if you're down 14-0, even 24-0, and you have Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, like it feels a little different. Like, oh, maybe. And heck, I'll give the Bengals credit. Coming out of halftime, they did exactly what they needed to do. They get a stop, they get the ball to the offense, and they score quick. And then Jake Browning shows great patience, pocket awareness, slides, throws it to Joe Mixon for the 2-point conversion. And it's like, okay, it's 24-8. Get a stop. Get a turnover. This is when the defense, you already got one stop, but now get that opportunistic turnover that you seem to always get. And instead, George Pickens danced on their head, running past Cheeto. And I get it. He did have the straight arm out there. Cheeto mentioned that to the official, but it's bad. And it was bad. You can't give up three huge plays, rather, to George Pickens. 86 yards, 66 yards, and 44 yards. And the 44-yarder was the one that I forgive the most because it's just a heck of a play. The other two, not really forgivable.
I have issue with the second one, too, because it was a crazy deep drop for Mason Rudolph. The Bengals sent 4. Nobody got home.
Sure.
In that situation, how are you letting them, like, the only thing you can't do in that spot, like, who cares if they run time, you don't get the ball back? Like, the only thing you can't do in that spot is, 1, let a guy take several hitches, step into a bomb, and 2, let a guy get behind you. And so it was a great play for George Pickens. Pickens, you can't take anything away from him in this game, unfortunately. Like, he made the plays. You can't say he didn't make the plays, but the other side of that coin is typically that the Bengals didn't make the plays. And again, you have to credit Pittsburgh for executing, as much as I don't want to. I don't think this means Pittsburgh is good. We'll see the next 2 games. We'll see if they make a change at quarterback after today. Have fun with that, Pittsburgh Steelers. We don't have to talk about it too much after this, but it was pretty embarrassing, like, for the entire team, because of what Pittsburgh's done the last 3 weeks, what Pittsburgh did between the Cincinnati games. how lost they looked, how well the Bengals were playing. But it comes back to this other conversation we're going to have, James, of they can't win in the division this year. Are you kidding me? Like, there's a very clear path to 0-6 in the division this year. And to be fair, they did not have healthy Joe Burrow for any of their division games in their entirety. And they played close games with Baltimore, who's going to win the division. But 0-6 in the division? Can't do that. They've talked about the importance of winning your division games. And, someone asked us, and they reminded me today, somebody asked us in the preseason, one of our mailbags, is the division, the strength of the division, the biggest obstacle to the Bengals this year? Well, the answer to that question is still no, because losing Joe Burrow was their biggest obstacle. But 0-6 in the division? Yikes.
Yeah. And no team, shout out to my guy, Russ Heltman, for this. No team since 2002. I'm going to make sure I get this stat right. Yeah. No team has made the playoffs since 2002, starting 0-5 in the division. So good luck. It's really tough. And obviously we know that. We knew how much of a must win it was. But the other aspect of this, it did feel like, and maybe it's because they're at home and you get off to the start, but it just felt like one team was way more urgent in how they were playing than the other, specifically the defense. Like,
I think they just lost. I think they just got beat up. I don't know.
Sure. Did the Bengals defense look desperate? Najee Harris is not like a quality running back, just to be clear. He was averaging 7 yards a carry. Maybe it is that simple. I
have a hard time going to effort and urgency, and
not
effort.
What
was at stake here.
Not effort
and urgency. Like those are.
What did the defense do well?
They played poorly. That doesn't mean they weren't urgent. I think they were just bad.
I don't think 100 times out of 100 there is no scenario in which the Steelers give up that Pickens play.
Well, they did to T. Higgins, though.
Not on play 2. They did not to T. Higgins. It was completely different.
I mean, it's the safety who takes a bad angle and T. Higgins runs by him. It's different because it's man in his zone.
Man is no doubt. And I don't know. I think this defense should have had a chip on its shoulder the size of DJ Reader. And it did not feel like that from the jump. It didn't. They got beat up. You don't get beat up if you have urgency. You really don't. You might lose. There's two different things. Beat up versus just losing. To me, there's a bit of a difference, especially with the defense. The offense, they moved the ball. Jake Browning was awful today, and they lost some in the trenches. We knew they weren't going to be able to run the ball, though. So
I just don't know how you quantify that. Like you could say the tackles didn't have.
You can't quantify it. It's not a PFF.
Tackles were, well, like in any means. I mean, like I just don't know what that even means. I think they just got their ass kicked. That's it.
Sure. I agree. There's no debating that. I don't know. 44 yards, 66 yards, 86 yards. Heck, George Pickens was about to get booed out of Pittsburgh.
I know. The corners were bad. The safety was bad.
He should have been going for his head this week. Like that, they should have been trying to get him off the field. And I don't mean hurt, just to be very clear.
You mean mental game.
I mean literally get in his head and shut him down and make him go off, like slam his helmet on the sideline. Yeah. And instead, you let him off the hook the second play of the game. It was second play of scrimmage.
Literally a worst case scenario start. And it snowballed. They did not contain the damage. It spiraled out of control immediately. And the path of the playoffs is, as much as Bengals fans probably don't even want to hear about this after this game, even harder from here. It does still technically exist, but that is a very, very uphill battle, James. And like you mentioned, hasn't been done before. So we'll finish the show there with what this means going the rest of the way coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the place you need to go this holiday season for last-minute tickets, flash deals, the perfect tickets for you. You'll get to see the seats before you purchase those tickets, so you know the exact view, you know exactly what you're getting, and you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets for any event, not just maybe a Bengals game. Maybe you want to go to that Bengals Cleveland regular season finale, or maybe you're going to make the trip to Kansas City on New Year's Eve, or maybe it's your favorite concert, NBA team, or anything in between. Gametime has you covered, and you can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. My cousin used the Gametime app just a few weeks ago to go to the Bengals Jags game in Jacksonville on Monday Night Football. Last minute, he got him on Monday evening. It was a smart decision, and it was a fun game. Certainly much more fun than Saturday night. You can get your tickets as well with the Gametime app. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase.
James, there are a couple bright spots we could talk about before we talk about the bleak playoff hopes after dropping this game. T. Higgins was one. He made his plays and had that long touchdown catch outrunning the practice squad safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think they were in cover 2 on that play, but was playing a half field coverage. So that was nice for T. T had some nice plays in this game. Yoshi had some nice plays in this game. Was that the other one? What are the other bright spots for you?
Brad Robbins. He had a bad punt, but he also had 2 inside the 10, 1 inside the 5.
Yes.
It's something to build on. It is. I know he's been bad, and he had a bad one again.
It was very
that put
bad.
the Steelers.
Today was bad. Yeah.
But maybe you can build on it a little bit. Also, Evan McPherson still hasn't missed a kick inside of 50 yards this year. So interesting.
He did kick one today. I was like, did he even kick one today? And I'm like, oh yeah, 11, of course.
Other bright spot, and we'll have more time on this. At halftime, though, I have to look at my halftime observations. I'm pretty sure Joe Mixon had 5 carries for 4 yards. Chase Brown was averaging 3.7 a carry, and I think he had three carries at halftime. Mm-hmm. I thought Chase Brown, and this isn't a Mixon thing. I think Chase Brown found yards that weren't necessarily there. I would have liked to see him get more touches run-wise, and he ended up with only 4 carries. But I thought he was running hard, making a man or two miss here and there. I don't know if he'll ever be a bell cow, but I certainly wish he would have gotten maybe split the carries with Mixon in a game like that when you know you're not running the ball well. Because Mixon's final numbers, they look way better than they actually were because he had a couple garbage time runs.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see the concepts that they were running for Chase Brown versus what they're running for Mixon, because that's always been the question. And the reason that I think Chase Brown isn't on the field more is that they trust Joe Mixon to execute some of the things where you have to set up blocks, you have to execute your reads, you have to be patient, use your vision. But I think they did run at least one play that was a zone play with Chase Brown in this game. So, and they did last week too. There was more of those slow developing plays for Chase Brown, less of the, you're going to always hit this hole in the same spot. And sometimes you're going to need to bounce it, but less of that have to read and pick your point of attack for Chase Brown in general than Joe Mixon. But the athleticism continues to show up for him. And so there continues to be long-term bullishness. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair, bright spot. Trey Hendrickson had a sack. That's all I got on the defense. Linebackers continue to be
that might be it.
Down.
How about Mason Rudolph outrunning Logan Wilson on 3rd and 7?
Yeah, that killed me a little bit inside.
What the hell is going on?
Logan Wilson, he also, I don't want to pile on, but he also had a bad angle trying to catch somebody in the flat and ended up getting outrun up the sideline for like 8 yards instead of 3 yards or something like that. Was one of the guys that bit the wrong way on a Jaylen Warren check down reception on 3rd and 5 for a first down before the Steelers scored a touchdown on the one opportunity the Bengals had to get off the field on that drive. He and Mike Hilton both bit on the eyes of Mason Rudolph on that play.
Don't look. How many quarterback hits did they have?
Like 3?
3 quarterback hits, 1 sack.
Trey had one where he came unblocked and he got hurt. But he went back into the game at least, so they didn't lose Trey Hendrickson to an injury. But yeah, he had one unblocked. He had the sack. I think BJ Hill had one, and maybe Cam Sample.
It is Yeah, you're right. BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson, and Cam Sample. Those are the three.
Nice.
Yeah, Cam Sample. I remember Cam's now.
The little boot play.
Defense was awful, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I know everything was awful, but I mean, they were 3 yards away from getting to 400 again. They were at 397.
Well, you know what? We can hope for a quarterback controversy in Pittsburgh because that would be entertaining for me. I would derive some entertainment from that, like for like 30 seconds maybe. Playoff picture though, James. They need to win the last 2, and then they would need help.
Yep. And I always thought they were losing one of the final 4 as we looked at it going into last week. This of the next 3 and now 2 felt like the most winnable one.
Yeah.
Now, you may say that Cleveland game, but Cleveland has had the Bengals number, so I'm just not going to say that. Now, that may feel different in another week. It really might, and you're at home and all of those things, but I'm not looking forward. Everyone's like, oh, the Chiefs stink. Yeah, you may think the Chiefs stink, but they still have a winning record, and going to Arrowhead sucks. It's not fun.
Well, they're winning with defense. And like you want to put Browning against another tough defense next week. They're going to have to come with a totally different game plan to deal with the Steve Spagnuolo game plan again. And they did well against Brian Flores, and then they got schooled by Mike Tomlin. So another tough challenge against a guy who has constructed great playoff, great winter defenses for Kansas City and is one of the best defenses in the league, period. By scoring, they've allowed the second fewest points in the AFC, have the Kansas City Chiefs, second only to the Baltimore Ravens. So it's not like it gets easier. And teams were moving the ball on Pittsburgh. Teams were running the ball on Pittsburgh. The Bengals couldn't figure it out. So things need to get a lot better. They have some time to do it. At least they get to go home to their families, get to take a Christmas to decompress, hopefully. If you celebrate, you have a nice Christmas as well. Any other closing thoughts, James?
Just unfortunate that they had this kind of performance. And, Jake Browning after the game, and as we record this, they're doing their post-game stuff and in the locker room. And Jake Browning said they kicked our ass, which obviously they did. Chidobe Awuzie said we came in to whoop them and they whooped us. Plenty to play for is what Sam Hubbard said. And I'm just skimming these. T. Higgins said their backs are against the wall, and their backs are against the wall. And over the past couple of years, they've responded the right way when their backs are against the wall. We'll see if they can do it again against a team that is battling for that 1 seed in their head. I certainly think that's what the Chiefs are hoping to slide into, but I doubt they will. But they're still thinking that they can win out and beat the Bengals and move forward. So.
At the very least, a 2 seed. Like seeding does matter for the Kansas City Chiefs, for sure.
No doubt. And last thing, like you said, Merry Christmas. Thank you to everyone out there that listens, watches, pays attention to the podcast. And we'll be back after Christmas, but we want you to enjoy it. And it sucks that this is our last show for a few days, Jake, because it would be much more fun if the end result were a little different.
Yeah, I think I wore a Christmas hat last year around this time of year.
Sure.
I can't remember.
I actually have a Santa hat that I would have worn, and I'm like, probably not going to play as well.
Yeah, not
when
really
it's
the
34-11.
Not really the time.
Can I tell you my big gaffe? I didn't throw 3 interceptions, but I did make a mistake. So I wrote my post game for all Bengals, and I post it. And I had everything updated, and you're updating it on the fly. You have your article ready, especially in a game like that for a while.
Yeah.
And I didn't update the score from 31-11 to 34-11. So it was actually, I ended up doing it, but about 5 minutes later. But that's a false start on me.
Small gaff. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Thanks for listening. Merry Christmas to those who celebrate, and have a good one.